So here's your 5-minute revision video on primary and secondary storage. The only two you need to remember for primary storage is RAM and cache. Looking at these points, we'll address them individually, but you have to understand they both do two different jobs in a system. So both are accessed regularly by the CPU, billions of times a second. They're typically not very high in capacity. RAM's a few gigabytes, but cache can be a few kilobytes to megabytes. They're both located on or near the CPU. If you look at the pictures, the cache is on like integrated circuit on the motherboard right next to the CPU, whereas RAM, you load it into slots on the motherboard, which again is very close to the CPU. Both of these are volatile, meaning the information you save there and then is erased if the power were to go or you were to turn the computer off. Anything in RAM or cache, if you turn the power off, is lost. That's what we mean by volatile. Both of these have incredible read and write speeds. We're talking billions of instructions read and written a second. So what do they both do? The RAM stores what we call current running programs following a von Neumann architecture, or the current stored program model. So when you open Word, the whole program, as much as you're using, is thrown into RAM so you can use it without any delay whatsoever. Any data you saved or creating at that point is saved also in RAM until you save it later, and we'll talk about that when we get to secondary storage. Cache is a bit different. It doesn't store any files at all like you know it, not like you know it. Not your Word file, not anything like that, but what it does is it stores system instructions or the fetch, execute, decode cycle messages, and it just saves them over and over and over, making the computer work every time you move the mouse, every time you need to copy and paste, every time you need to do what we call BIOS instructions, which are saved in the OS. So that's happening all the time, in real time. Primary storage is accessed first, if you like. But then we've got secondary storage. It's a little bit nuanced, but it's accessed regularly, just like the primary storage, but not like the primary storage. You'll see why in a second. It's typically high in capacity. The examples I've given you are the hard disk drive or solid state drives. They can be terabytes in size. CDs, DVDs, again, megabytes to gigabytes, but much higher in capacity than your RAM and your cache. They're connected externally, we say. In other words, I've got to buy a CD writer. I've then got to get a lead, using an SCSI lead, and then connect that to the motherboard so it can read that it's there, but it doesn't access it the same way RAM and cache is accessed. If you look at the HDD drive or the SSD drive, it's accessed exactly the same way through a cable, but not quite like the cache and the RAM. So we call these two storage devices non-volatile, meaning this kind of storage, the HDD or the SSD, stores all your large files, all your games, all your apps, all your videos, all your music, because if you turn the computer off, you don't want to lose all that. It saves it permanently. That's what we mean by non-volatile. CDs are exactly the same, but they have a little bit of an extra advantage to them. You can take them out of your CD drive, the permanent storage, the very cheap, and the portable. You can buy 500 CDs these days for like, let's go on Amazon, have a look, for less than a tenner. It's crazy. We don't use them anymore really, because we have other non-volatile secondary storage like pen sticks, SD drives. If you remember the old zip disks, if you're really old, floppy disks, those kinds of secondary storage are much more reliable, non-volatile, and they're still accessed pretty quickly. So let's just review. Last 30 seconds. Primary storage, RAM and cache, accessed extremely quickly, but it's volatile. Secondary storage, still accessed quickly, but it's non-volatile. This is where all the programs are saved, so when you click on your icons, it can load it into RAM and play the thing without you having to reinstall it every single time you turn the machine off. That's your lot.